to Just Onside. Excellent weekend. 7 very good reasons why I'm happy. OS, a good weekend for you as well. Excellent result yesterday,
Yeah.
which we'll no doubt hear your thoughts on. But how was your weekend? Anything exciting happened?
No. Very calm, very relaxing. Caught up with a former work colleague as well, just to catch up for a coffee and just see how he is. So that was really nice. But yeah, got back for the game yesterday. An eventful game to say the least. But yeah, 7 good reasons that you mentioned. 7 very good reasons. I just want to lay the context for this. I wasn't following the Leeds game on Saturday, and then you text me out of the blue, saying, and this is true story. Like I genuinely was not following the game at all, and you text me saying "Farker out," and I was like, crap, they've lost. To which I obviously then checked the game, and you'd won or you were winning. I think 7-0 is probably the 90th minute or so. So, tell us how it happened. Are you how you feeling?
Uh, this was probably the most complete performance. I mean, we've had good performances. I'm not saying we've not had good performances, but from minute one to minute 95, 96, whatever it was a sustained performance. We were exceptional. Cardiff were poor, but Cardiff, like many teams in the league, are quite ordinary. It's an average league, but they were on the back of I think an unbeaten 8 game run, so they were in some decent form. But we absolutely battered them. Some wonderful goals. I don't know whether you've seen the goals, but some really really nice goals, some really good performances, and everybody was outstanding. So delighted, but we should have scored 10. A better coach, and we would have scored 12.
Yeah, if only he was a bit more proactive with his substitutions, you could have got 10 goals. Yes,
But
indeed.
do you know where this is where the frustration is because this is our
Frustration.
strength. Well, no. This is we should be doing this week in, week out, playing on the front foot. Uh, and it was this is what this team is capable of. I mean, you can turn around and say, well, it's Cardiff, but as I said, Cardiff were on a decent run, unbeaten in 8, so they weren't a pushover. But really, if we play to our potential, there's no team, and I mean no team in this league that really should stand toe to toe with Leeds. Uh, in saying that, we've got a really tough game on Wednesday. We're with an old adversary, Frankie Lampard. So, and he's been fantastic for commentary. So it's going to be a real challenge because I've always rated Frankie. I keep on thinking that this guy should be a good coach, but he always seems to fail or at least not fulfill his potential. But I think maybe perhaps the championship is his level. Maybe this is what he needs to do. Get a side up and then just stay with that side rather than go for a big team. But that's on Wednesday. Uh, but right, I've talked about Leeds and a thumping victory. There was another team that had a thumping victory. Uh, Bit of a surprise, but maybe not a surprise. Arsenal 5, Man City 1, and in the end, an absolute canter. So your thoughts and what the difference was, because at 1-1 it looked quite an even game, but in the end it was a rout. So what's your thoughts? Obviously, you watched the game.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of pressure on Arsenal going into the Sunday game. We'll probably speak about it briefly. Liverpool obviously overcoming Bournemouth away from home in a tightly contested affair. Probably could have gone either way. Ultimately, a bit of class deciding the game, as is often the case with Mo Salah, who's writing his own story right now in the Premier League. I mean, yeah, Arsenal under huge pressure going up against the four-time consecutive Premier League champions, Man City, a team that they haven't consistently been able to overcome, although in recent times they have started to turn things around against the very best teams. But you can understand the pressure that they were under. I don't have them in the Premier League title race. I still don't. But ultimately, what glimmer of hope that they do have, they were really staring down the barrel, weren't they? You're heading into that game. The players spoke about it. And I think, to be fair, we'll probably come on to the large picture later on, but just in terms of the game itself, yeah, I think ultimately the better team won. I think that's pretty clear. But you are right. I think from minutes probably 15 to 55 or what have you, up until when Haaland scored, you could argue Man City were having the better of it. They seemed to be the ones wrestling control back. Arsenal were ones kind of falling into that retreat, which they've often been accused of doing so. And quite often their defensive prowess will still allow them to see out games. Now, there has been some, let's say, some unusual set of circumstances this year, which hasn't allowed them to manufacture enough victories, let's say, and that's probably what's cost them in the end. But the fact is, you've got to give Arsenal a huge amount of credit, a lot of pressure. It goes 1-1. I was thinking the worst. I thought in a game that they were probably going to have to push to win, do they now get sucker punched and lose the game ultimately, which is never a place you want to be. I don't know what your thoughts are. I
Mm,
mean, maybe perhaps you slightly touched on it with Leeds there. I think you seem to be the kind of fan who just wants to see a team on the front foot because you think that will
mm,
yield more positive results than negative, and that's fair enough if you've got the talent advantage. I think yesterday you could argue that Arsenal did have the talent advantage, even though that they've got a few critical players missing, not least probably their best offensive weapon in Saka. Um, but to have an 18-year-old making big contributions, a 17-year-old making big contributions, Arsenal are reaping the rewards of investing a little bit of support and time into their youngsters, who's probably going to save them a lot of money. I've said since the very start, since he's broken into the Arsenal team, that I'm pretty confident Miles Lewis-Skelly will be going to the World Cup next year. I've not seen anything to suggest that he won't, depending on what Thomas Tuchel plays as a formation. And Nwaneri is also making his own story right now with another wonderful goal. Look, Arsenal, I thought were the better team in the end. I want to speak more about the fact that they showed immense, I think, courage and commitment to see that game through at a time when their whole season was probably right there. It felt like as though if they were to lose this game, the obituaries would be written. You can imagine some of the criticism. I would have argued probably mistaken criticism that Mikel Arteta would have come in for, but he would have. There would have been a lot of focus today from the media about whether or not this manager has taken Arsenal as far as they can come, which is some of the narrative that I've started to see in some of the mainstream media, which I find bizarre. But ultimately, the team deserves a lot of credit because I was thinking this as the goals were going in, that they faced that, let's say, that challenge and met it head on. And they need a bit of luck. Arteta spoke about it after the game. That 2-1 goal was huge, wasn't it? Timing wise, you need a little bit of luck to go for you. It was a clear deflection, but if you don't buy the ticket, you often don't win the raffle. But from there on in, they didn't look back. They played on the front foot. I thought Declan Rice had one of his best games as an Arsenal player. He started to play forward. You think Ayub about his contributions in the game. Set up the pre-assist for the first goal with the first time ball to Havertz. Created the assist for the Havertz miss by pressing into Kovacic. If you remember the glaring miss that Havertz had, that was a Rice challenge. But then also the switch to Nwaneri, the kind of incisive ball into Miles Lewis-Skelly. Some of the things that you often asked of him, right, Ayub, when he joined Arsenal, which is can he play some of those kind of more forward-thinking,
mm.
decisive moments? And I think he's starting to blossom into that type of footballer. He's obviously got the pace and power. I don't think anybody questions that side of things in terms of his aggression and power. So all-round performance from Arsenal party. I think to a man they were pretty excellent. Um, I'll let you maybe speak about the other side of the ledger, but Arsenal have had some difficult moments against Man City. I think they went through a run from 2017 onwards where I think they lost or they failed to win 16 of 17 times. Are you? Against Man City, and they took quite a number of spankings along the way as well. So the fact that they've started to turn that around in some of the bigger games shows a sign of their maturity, sign of their mentality as well. And I think in the end, a very well deserved win. Where that leaves them in terms of any title race, I'll let you speak to that. I again have them as rank outsiders. I see them as the second best team in the league. I haven't seen anything to suggest otherwise. They're a very good team. There's another team, however, that's for me superior to them, playing better. Every metric suggests that they're playing better. But for the most part, yesterday was a day that Arsenal deserved a little bit of shine. A great performance. Again, I'll let you speak on the other side of the ledger, but a fantastic win and one that they would hopefully take a bit of confidence from as well.
I agree. Amazing victory. Uh, but maybe this is a reflection of where City are at. That at the end, it wasn't really a surprise. I mean, I mean, under normal circum, if this was 2 years ago, it will be the talk of the town. People will be talking about the game. But really, it's the way that City have been playing. The implosion wasn't a shock. I mean, there's a soft underbelly to Manchester City at this moment in time. There's a lot of criticisms going towards Guardiola. He's I mean, I've said it for a number of years that I think he's a great coach of great players, and when things aren't going his way in terms of perhaps not having the right personnel, he struggles. But it was a strange game, but a game that is symptomatic of where City are at. They've worked hard to get back in the game, and within no time at all. I mean, that Partey goal, I think it was a minute, 2 minutes after they equalised, and it just almost took the wind out of the sails of Man City. And I've got to be honest, it looked as if they just laid down and surrendered, which really is not what you would expect from a team that's won the championship for the last 4 years. Uh, and Guardiola is doing obviously what he does best. He's just buying players now to try and arrest this slide that City are under. And I think deep down he's probably written off this season. But I think the question needs to be asked that maybe is it time for Guardiola maybe just to step back for a minute, maybe have a year out of the game. Maybe he's just perhaps. I mean, there was
Mm.
talk recently of that he split up from his missus. I don't know whether that's had an impact. Obviously, the Rodri missing is a major factor, but it should never be the main reason. I mean, if that's the main reason he's going to attribute, then really that is, I think, scandalous on the part of Guardiola. Of course, yeah, the player of the best player in the world, at least based on obviously the metrics that are used in modern football, is going to have an impact on any side. But that cannot be for Manchester City. They've got enough quality. They've got supposedly one of the best coaches ever, and that should have been enough for them still to be competitive and to be serious title contenders. I think they've failed on every front, and yesterday was maybe a reflection of the season, and it encapsulated exactly what City are all about at this moment in time. That they can perhaps battle every now and then for a small period of time, but that soft underbelly was exposed again. And I don't. I mean, I really would be thinking if I was the owner of Manchester City, I'd be thinking, right, we've gone out and bought players, but is this the right man at this right time? I mean, I'm not saying Guardiola is obviously ready for the scrap heap, but maybe he needs time out just to recharge his batteries. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, look, I think when you put it like that, I do see the angle with which you're coming from. You're not saying simply get rid of him. You just wonder whether or not it's a case of he looks a little worn down on the touchline as well. And again, he's won everything there is to win at Man City. This is not to say that he's failed. I don't see it like that, by the way. I think any team can have this type of season, and it can happen after prolonged periods of success. I often use that example. I'll use it again. I often speak about that great Australian cricket team. I often think that a byproduct of having success in team sports is A, the fact that you become very reliant on those elite stars. We're talking Warren, McGrath, just to name a few. So what happens is many other players don't necessarily get a look in. Many often speak about Stuart McGill's Test career and what have you, and what could have been. He's a very good
Mm,
spinner in his own right, but because of the greatness of Shane Warne. But often what happens is when those players then move on, there is then just this kind of not vacuum, but there's a huge drop off in terms of just talent and ability, and it took Australia a significant amount of time just to kind of recover. Obviously, Warren McGrath retired in the same Test match, if memory serves. So I often think it's a bit like that. You have prolonged bouts of success, and then you can have these kind of down moments where sometimes it just feels hard to get up for certain events. I mean, you can't tell me that Man City feel kind of incredibly, let's say, full of. You can't tell me Arsenal, for example, compared to Man City, feel the same way about a pursuit of a Premier League title. Not right now. Arsenal are desperately hungry to land a Premier League title, and City will for sure want to because they're professionals. But that fire in the belly that Declan Rice spoke about in his post-match comments, you can't tell me it's the same for a Man City player who's won everything there is to win at domestic level. And if they're feeling that, the manager's often going to feel that. Now, the great ones obviously reinvent themselves, and he has done. I do genuinely think he's done that at Man City and built a couple of squads there and won with different iterations. But I just wonder, to your point, they've won a lot of tight Premier Leagues as well. And we often used to look at the other side of the coin with that, where we used to say, oh, how's that going to affect Liverpool and how's that going to affect Arsenal? We often don't sometimes think, okay, what's the pound of flesh to play for City playing all these big games in terms of, the mental challenges of that, Ayub, knowing that
Mm,
you're always going to be there. Remember, they fought and absolutely scrapped their way to Champions League semi-finals, Champions League finals, and couldn't get through that door until they did against Inter Milan. So I just wonder whether it's just a little bit of a down moment. It's clear when you watch them play, you that they are much more ponderous, much more
mm,
slower, um, much more anxious in their play. Clearly, not the same team at the back. Teams know this. Teams can get at them. It's one of the reasons why Arsenal pressed them in a lot of key situations and actually had a lot of success. Even the situation with the Partey goal, he's there thinking forward, trying to intercept forward and pass, and obviously gets his rewards for it. So I'm with you. They don't look like the same outfit. I don't think buying players will simply be the solution. I told you they will not win the Premier League title this year. They will not. I'm going to be careful with my words. They won't be favourites for the Premier League title next year either, regardless of who they buy, in my opinion. They've got a long road back in terms of challenging for the title because, again, I say it often, I still think Arsenal, they've got an unbeaten home record. I do think Arsenal still have a little bit of aura when teams are playing them in terms of knowing we're going to have to work super hard because they're a slightly defensively minded team, Arsenal are. But they know they've got enough players up front who can do damage like Saka, like Odegaard, and others. So I think teams do feel as though against Arsenal they've got to pay them adequate respect. Again, not to the level of what City have been over the last 5, 6 years. Let's be very clear. But right now, as of 2025 in February, right now, clearly teams think that they can get at City, and invariably they often find themselves creating many opportunities to score goals, and they've been massively vulnerable. I think this is the most they've conceded in an away game under Guardiola. I think in the league, 5-1, their biggest
mm.
defeat or margin of defeat ever since that famous 4-0 defeat at Goodison. I think it was in 2017, I believe. So it's been a long, long time. Look, Arsenal deserve everything in terms of plaudits. Like I said, they've taken their fair share of spankings from this team, so they deserve credit. And I just want to quickly just get your thoughts here, but I don't know what your thoughts are. But we spoke last time about Arteta, and I told you the reasons why I want him to succeed. It's not just about whether I think he should have the opportunity to win a Premier League title or two, maybe at Arsenal. But the reason is because he's a former player. We spoke about it quite often, and,
Mm.
and there's some. I can only speak for myself, but there is an affinity for me in terms of, let's say, a Kai Havertz. Now, look, I think a lot of fans when they observe Kai Havertz, and I had my skeptical thoughts about him when he joined Arsenal as well. But there's something, in a sense, so beautifully vulnerable about a player who misses the chances that he does, and he misses some chances. Let's be very clear. I mean, that chance is as glaring as they come, and if they'd lost you can imagine what some of the
Mm.
headlines would have been today. I mean, he's got to. I mean, at the bare minimum, you've got to get it on target from there. I mean, it's an absolute no-brainer. You could see him go a little bit under there afterwards. Yet for him to show the smarts and the intelligence in terms of the way he ran off Martinelli to give him an overlap to create certain situations. He manufactured that situation very well between Akanji and Stones to give himself a little bit of space. I thought that was super smart and got his goal. There is something, I don't know about you, but there's something nice, warm, and fuzzy for me at least to know he did get his rewards at the end. He's a player who Arsenal like. He works hard. Yes, I know that's not enough for a striker. That's the modern day. That's how it is. That's fine. That's the price you pay if you're a striker in the biggest league in the world, the best league in the world. But it's nice that he got his rewards because he's a player who's under pressure, had a big miss in a big situation. I don't think you ever want to see that for any player, to be honest, in terms of just that moment and what it meant. But it was great to see him get a goal. Obviously, got an assist at the start as well. So hopefully he can kick on and continue to deliver some big moments for Arsenal.
I mean, and just a brief one on habits before we move on. He's a decent player. I think I do like him. I think he works hard. He's not the most naturally gifted of footballers. And I think that's therein lies the problem. I think naturally gifted footballers they're much more potent. I think with Havertz, it always seems as if he has to work really, really hard, which he does. And I think he's made the best of his ability. I mean, if he could add being clinical, then I think it would be a wonderful asset. But I still think he's an asset. I think he's a really, really good player. I think he's a player that I think other players would warm to because I think he puts in a shift. He's hard working. I think he's a very smart, intelligent football player as well, which I think in the Premier League can never be underestimated. And but as I said, it's that there'll always be the criticism because I think my main reason because he's not natural. There's not he's had to work for everything that he's probably accomplished, and finishing is probably one of the hardest things to do. It seems I think some players make it look easy, but it isn't. Which is why you pay top dollar for proven strikers. But he's doing his job. I think he's doing a fabulous job, and there's a reason why Arteta picks him on a regular basis.
Yeah, and look, ultimately in a striker, it's invariably that you're not going to have everything. When you look at an Isak, who's kind of touted as probably the best all-around striker in the Premier League. Yes, you've got Haaland. I mean, look, I get it. He's an absolute monster for a goal scorer, and got a great goal yesterday in terms of the way he manipulated the position with Saliba as well. So give him credit, but you can't keep the best players down consistently. But many regard Isak as probably the best all-around striker in the league, and even he fluffed his lines a few times against Fulham as Fulham came away with a big victory at St James's Park. I just think ultimately he's not the most natural ball striker, and that's his challenge, right? You think about some of the best ball strikers in history in terms of in the Premier League. Obviously, Shearer comes to mind, maybe
Mm,
even Robbie Fowler. Think about Jermaine Defoe, Kane, obviously being one of them, even Rooney. They strike a mean ball. They feel
mm,
very comfortable from 12 to 18 yards out. They're quite cold in front of goal because they have confidence they can find those spots. Obviously, Henri was one of the best as well. He's just not that natural when it comes to ball striking, which means that a lot of the times, even that one, I mean, the nets is pretty huge from there. I know there was a defender on the line of you, but you've got to hit the target. He scuffed it wide, hasn't
mm.
he? He's probably overthought the situation. So yeah, no, I'm with you. I think he brings so many other attributes, but ultimately, it's difficult to find everything in one package in a striker. But yeah, time will tell.
But he's good enough. But just before we move on to the Bournemouth Liverpool game, in terms of the celebrations after the game, uh, I mean I must confess I didn't see the post-match celebrations, but there was a couple of comments being made that again Arsenal were it was as if they'd won the league. I mean I don't know. I mean what was that the case? I mean were they over celebrating or do you think it's perfectly deserved? It's a great result against a champion outfit, so why not celebrate?
There's a couple of things here. I mean, look, there was some talk about firstly the Gabriel celebration in Haaland's face when we scored, yeah, when Arsenal scored in the first few minutes. I'm not a big fan of that. Let's be very clear. I don't think it's smart when you have so much of the game to go. But Gabriel is an emotional player. He gives as good as he gets. He obviously got the ball thrown at him at the Etihad Stadium when Man City equalised. If you remember, famously, Haaland threw the ball at him, which I would argue is more egregious than perhaps
Mhm.
someone just screaming in your face. But I think it was ill-advised. Let me be very clear. But he's ultimately someone who thinks, well, I'll back it up. I can dish it out. I'll take it. It's fine. No big deal. He spoke after the Etihad game that, it's an effort. It's a battle. It's fine. This is what it's there for. And it kind of reminds you of the good old days that you've in some ways.
Mm.
And he said, look, we'll wait for them at the Emirates, and here we were at the Emirates Stadium. In terms of after the game, though, listen, you might say I'm biased. I follow Mikel Arteta's comments very closely in recent times. Uh, he was thrown a bit of a grenade when he came to Gary Neville's comments about Arsenal playing the victim all the time with the referee's decisions. He didn't bite. He was told about Michael Oliver's abuse. He condemned that massively. He took it upon himself to condemn a lot of Arsenal fans who'd given Kai Havertz's wife. So if you look at all of his comments in recent times, I think he's struck the right tone. He talks about nobody feels sorry for us. We get on with it. We compete. There's nothing. I think Mikel Arteta, in terms of his sound bites, has been absolutely fine before the game, after the game. In terms of celebrations, are you look? I don't really see what the issue is because it's a tightly contested game. This is a team that's beaten them consistently for the past 6, 7 years, and I mean like Arsenal have had to at full time many of these games just head down to having taken a spanking 3-0, 4-0, 5-0 home and away in front of your own fans and had to kind of face all of that. Now you're having a little bit of success in game against who they still believe, Mikel Arteta spoke about it, they're the benchmark. So he's paying all the compliments. I think if you win a game like that, you're surely allowed to celebrate a little bit. It's in front of your home fans. Now, Arsenal know how important it is if they're going to achieve any success this season to have the fans on side. The fans are obviously loving it. Arsenal should be allowed to celebrate. Why shouldn't you? It's a game of football. It's professional football. Do I think they're getting carried away with it? No, because the last 3 years, sure, I don't know if you agree, but they've been arguably the most consistent team in the Premier League over that
Mm.
span because Liverpool have had a down year, City have had a down year. I say down, it's relative terms, let's be very clear. but Arsenal have just, they've been there, haven't they? So no, I don't really see it. I don't understand it in any way, shape, or form. I'd feel maybe perhaps a bit different if, let's say, they were in the title race and let's say there were two games to go and perhaps they celebrated a win at Anfield massively when they were still, let's say, a game behind or a point behind and had to still play. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
I don't understand it, but I just think when it's a big game, you should be allowed to celebrate. I don't really see what else you can do. Do I think Arsenal thought that they'd won the league yesterday? Far from it, because Declan Rice, who speaks as good as anyone in football, I think, for a footballer,
Mm.
said, look, Liverpool, give them massive credit. They've played really well. They're the standard. We're still quite a few points off them, so we're going to need a little bit of help, but we're also going to have to do our job. So, yeah, you should be allowed to celebrate in front of your own fans. I don't get it. They weren't doing knee slides and the Jurgen Klinsmann celebration or anything like that. But I mean, in front of your own fans, I like to celebrate, no?
Right, fair enough. Okay. Right. You touched upon briefly, or you talked about Rice talking about Liverpool, and let's go to Bournemouth Liverpool, which for me was the game of the weekend, or at least in terms of uh, uh, where both clubs are at. It was a mouth-watering uh, prospect, and it, I think it sort of lived up to the billing now. I mean, some people might sort of say it wasn't full of flair and excitement, but it was very, very tightly contested. Two sides very evenly matched, and I think on another day, it could have gone the other way because I think you touched upon it at the start of the show when you sort of said that uh, a bit of class, and really that's I think the difference between Bournemouth and Liverpool. Liverpool have just got that sprinkling of star quality, and really it was their gone player, Mo Salah, which I think was the difference. But Bournemouth competed, more than competed, and I thought that was an excellent result. And again, testimony to Slot. I mean, you can turn around and say, well, look, it's just that they've got a little bit more quality, but that was a really, really well managed game by Slot. Didn't give too much to Bournemouth, and I think he showed his quality. But Iriola as well, I think he should take a lot of credit. That's the Liverpool perhaps are the best team in club football, and they gave them more than a game. And as I said, on another day, it could have been Bournemouth coming out the victors. So, what were your thoughts? I mean, did you enjoy the game? Did you watch the game?
I do like how when it comes to certain managers, you're very selective about giving them praise, even when they've lost games. Yet for certain managers, even when they're spanking teams at home 7-0, you just don't mention them at all. It's just a very unusual spectrum with which you observe some of your managerial qualities and deficiencies. I mean, Guardiola's here winning trebles, and you're not a big fan. Iriola here, you gave him the big build-up, or you've been the last podcast, but they lost ultimately. So, and I thought the game was about wins and losses. You always say to me. So, yeah, look,
This is an exception then.
this is an exception, of course. Look, I mean, you're right. It was a tight game. It was a fantastic game in the sense of it felt like. I mean, you can tell the TV companies didn't have this down as a big game
Mm.
a long time ago. It was at 3 p.m. at UK. No doubt, probably should have been flexed to a TV slot. There's no doubt about it. We managed to obviously get it here because we get the games. But yeah, incredible game. Um, I mean, you're right. Liverpool, it could have gone a lot of ways. Bournemouth had a few opportunities at the start of the post. Obviously, Liverpool got in front for what was perceived to be a dubious penalty. I think Lewis Cook does clip him, which then forces Gakpo to clip his own legs, if that makes sense. So I think in the end it was a clip. I've seen them not given, I've seen them given, but I was okay with it because I do think Lewis Cook fouled him. And then Salah does what he does. And yet the game, second half, Bournemouth started incredibly strong, incredibly fast. Probably should have been level. Clive with a miss that he'll probably want to have back.
Mm.
And then pretty much quite quickly up the other end, you've got, like you mentioned, the gun player scoring what was a fantastic, fantastic goal. There is something about Mo Salah this year. Look, I think he's pretty much a shoe-in for PFA Player of the Year. I think the players vote in Feb normally, so I can't say anyone but him in a sense
Mm.
get the vote. So I think he's going to be a shoe-in for that award. Yes, honourable mentions for Van Dijk and perhaps one or two others. Alexander Isak and maybe one or two others. But those two players would be deserving. Salah just because ultimately the strikers, the decisive moments. And you'll think back, Ayub, to a couple of weeks ago when I don't know if you followed the Curtis Jones interview. I think he grew up as a Chelsea fan. I'll have to double check that, but he spoke about how if it was the comparisons often labeled between Hazard and Salah, and he spoke about how if it's for, let's say, for instance, if I wanted to watch a player and play or what have you, one game, and I had to spend some money to take Hazard, if I wanted a player who was going to win me some games, it's definitely Salah. And I think you saw that yesterday. I don't disagree with how he observed it. He took a bit of slack from Liverpool fans, but he did say in the interview to, I think, Rio Ferdinand that he had spoken to more about it. And he's allowed to have an opinion. It's fine. But Moyes, that plays in here in terms of
Mm,
decisive contributions. And that's what I love about Mo Salah. There are still times when he'll miss certain chances and all the rest of it, but he's such a threat. He's such an outlet for them that they have to absolutely account for the defense that is. And yet he always finds ways to make big, big contributions, deciding big games. And ultimately, if you're going to win Premier League titles, which I think they will, and if you're going to win and challenge for the Champions League, which I think they will as well, I'm pretty sure they will go deep, at least to the semis. You need these type of players healthy. I looked at their 11 against Bournemouth. That's their best 11, I would contend. So having your best players available down the running, and look, they'll have probably seen that game and after they won, and it's a huge victory away from home against a fantastic Bournemouth team led by, I mean, we joke, but a top manager who will be well sought after in the summer. That's a huge victory, and they'll have probably hoped that that would be the end of that with Arsenal dropping points against a Man City. So they'll be, I won't say disappointed. I don't think this at this point is too strong. I think Liverpool are in a very commanding position, knowing that if they take care of themselves, they should be fine. But a top win away from home, you can imagine if they drop points there. Everton obviously spank Leicester at home. They've got that game in hand next week. You can imagine a little bit of the storyline starts to build. I actually think this is also what makes Arsenal's win all the more kind of all the more credit you have to give to them, just because of the dynamics of the mentality in terms of Arsenal would have been hoping for a Liverpool dropping points. So no, huge credit to Liverpool, huge credit to the manager, fantastic achievement. I do think they're well on their way to winning this Premier League title. I think they are the best team in the league, best team in club football, as you mentioned, Ayub. But you're right, Bournemouth shouldn't let their heads hang too much. They were incredibly competitive. I think if they were not competitive and they just probably just surrendered. But I think given that, I don't know if you agree, but just given the nature of their players, they're probably too young to feel any other type of way. What I mean is they're not going to be burdened down by years of, let's say, not failure, but years of coming up short. I think they're just young, they're free, they express themselves. The manager's like that. He's not carrying any warts or any scars, let's say. So they played that way and definitely acquitted themselves in an admirable way. It'll be interesting to see if they can pick on and push on and see if they can challenge for the Premier League spots. But for Liverpool, huge victory. Away wins in the Premier League are like goalless, different and hugely valuable. So deserve immense credit.
in terms of Bournemouth, it will be interesting to see A, if Areola is still Bournemouth manager, and B, how they perform, because I mean, A, it's not quite the Leicester story, but right. I mean, they're playing with a great deal of freedom. There's no expectation really. But if they finish second, let's say, next season there will be expectations. So perhaps there'll be a little bit more pressure. But it was a wonderfully professional performance from Liverpool. A real uh, indication of the quality of Arne Slot, because this was a potential. I won't say a banana skin, because obviously this is Bournemouth, a team that's playing really well. But it could have been a game quite easily that they could have lost, but it was really professionally approached by Slot and the team. I think they acquitted themselves really well, and it all goes well for the rest of the season.
Yeah, just on that, you. But I just want to get your thoughts actually. How do you see it? I mean, I don't see it yet as a Premier League title race because I just think Liverpool, as probably will be confirmed next midweek if and when they beat Everton. That I just think they are too good for Arsenal right now, and I think they are the class of the league. I don't see it as a title race. Do you envision that this could become a Premier League title race, or do you think they've got enough in the bank?
They've got too much in the bank at this moment in time. And I think if it was tight, if there was only 1 or 2 points in it, then I think Liverpool, I mean Arsenal, I do. I'm a huge, I mean, whilst I may not say it, but I think Arsenal are I think as good as on their day uh Liverpool, because I think they've got I've there's enough quality if Arsenal had their full strength side available, they're a match for anybody. And I think they're a match for Liverpool as well. I mean, I think Liverpool perhaps just are a little bit more cute, a little bit more smart at the right times. They've got perhaps players that on the big m moments are clinical. Uh, but I think Arsenal, it's just that at the moment the gap is just a little bit too big, and I think Arsenal perhaps will be kicking themselves for losing points uh, early on in the season because I really do think that there isn't too much between Arsenal and Liverpool. I mean, we talked about, I talked about Liverpool being the best club side in the world. Yes, absolutely. I think they are playing that way, but Arsenal uh, are a damn good side with damn good players. And I think they'll probably look back and again, have we missed an opportunity because Man City have fallen by the wayside? Would have been a glorious opportunity for them to capitalize on that, but they've just had slip ups at the worst possible time, and I just think you can't see Liverpool just conceding that amount of ground. So I think it's an opportunity that perhaps maybe at the end of the season, Arteta might look at it and say, right, I had a chance this season because our usual foes, Man City, uh, were not performing and we just didn't perhaps do what we should have done our job, or at least that's my thoughts. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, listen, I think I know what you're coming from because ultimately that's also what something Carragher spoke about, Jamie Carragher spoke about yesterday after the game. But I often think, Ayub, in terms of, this should have been their year with Man City having a down year. I don't quite see it like that simply because I see each season on its own merits. And I think that has been proven to be the case over the last couple of years. If you remember, after the first season, Arsenal went close. There was a lot of talk that, hey, next year, this team will be better, that team will be better. What chances do Arsenal have? And they ran actually Man City closer. And now, after 2 years of coming up short and coming up close to their ultimate glory and their ultimate hopes of landing a Premier League title, here they are again. A bit adrift, absolutely. But yet, the eye test tells you that they are the second best team in the league. Like you mentioned, I just think each season has its own merits. This season, Liverpool obviously had a transformation in the dugout in terms of new personnel, new ideas, fresh voice. Sometimes that's what it takes. You spoke about Man City earlier. Perhaps that's what they not need, but could be that time where just the message
Mm,
sometimes needs to come from somebody else, right? There is that that happens in major organizations across all industries. So I just think each story has its own merit, and that's why I don't think Arsenal should beat themselves up that, oh, Man City had a down year. Well, Liverpool have had an incredible year so far. They've dropped points at you. We're in February. They've dropped points in 8 games in all competitions. One of them being the Champions League game against PSV, which they forfeited last week, pretty much.
mm,
And the other game being Spurs in the League Cup, which is still at half time. That's
mm.
still going to be
Yeah.
decided this week. So it's 6 games that they've dropped points in, and we're in February. Now that's the
Mm,
standard. So you've got to doff your cap. I'm okay with that.
mm,
Um, the reason why I say I don't think they should see it that way is because I'll say it before and I'll say it again. I genuinely think Arsenal can come again, even if they come up short. There's nothing that I'm seeing where I say, looks the end of a cycle or something like this. If you think about it, Arsenal don't have too many question marks about players leaving. There could still be some, let's be very clear. They could lose a couple of gun players. But there's talk obviously about a couple of key Liverpool players out of contract. Man City look like they have a lot of rebuilding to do. The manager looks like he needs a rest or needs some rejuvenation. You've got Man City's Premier League charges verdict that will come down the pike. Chelsea still have, I think you'd agree, a bit of way to go.
mm,
So Arsenal just need to keep knocking on that door, and if you knock loudly enough, consistently enough, sometimes the door opens. So I just see each season on its own merits. I think Arsenal can come again. So I see them outside the Premier League title race. Just because they're second doesn't mean we have a title race. They'd have to get a little bit closer. Just before we finish and wrap up, Ayub, Just want to get your thoughts on another miserable afternoon for Ruben Amorim at Manchester United. Watch the game, missed the first 10 minutes, but watch the game against Palace, and Palace probably well worthy of a win in the end at Old Trafford, a place where Manchester United are finding it difficult to play right now. I think that's what I could be wrong. I saw the statistic, but is that 5 games he's lost at home? I think it is in seven for Ruben Amorim, which is the fastest in terms of defeats at home, in terms of the number of league games that he's managed. I mean, of course, we're not going to lay this at his door. I get it. It's too early whatsoever, but he'd have been hoping to have a slightly more positive impact, wouldn't you think? Are you? I mean, they are
Mm.
languishing in um, the middle of the bottom half of the table. How do you see it for them? Any overarching thoughts?
I mean, firstly, I think he's probably in terms of his record, it's probably the worst record of any coaches at Manchester United in recent history. But in a bizarre sort of way, I mean, we talked about it when he arrived. I think he is the best man for the job. It's a huge task. And we've almost talked about it. This season's a write-off. So I'm not sure what his objectives are. Do you know when he's selecting a side for the game? I presume, obviously, as a coach, it's to win the game. But I think that with where they're at, perhaps maybe other things that he's looking at as well. But I still think he'll come good. It's going to be tough because there's a lot of players that he needs to get rid of first. And I'd like to sort of talk about Marcus Rashford as a sort of final point before we sort of sign off. He's now, I think it's a done deal. He's gone out on loan to Aston Villa. And I've been talking about this for a long, long time that I think he was stinking the joint out. His mind's not on it, or at least it's not as he's not as committed as he should be as a professional footballer in the Premier League. So do you do you think this will be an opportunity for Rashford to reinvent himself, or do you reckon he's too far gone? He's not as committed, and there's no reason to say that he's going to be any more committed uh, uh, with Emery at Aston Villa.
Look, the thing with Marcus Rashford, I don't know if you agree, but ultimately he gets a lot more airtime than perhaps he deserves. That's the truth of the matter. We often speak about why we love sports. I say to you all the time, it's about because of the stories, the narratives, all the drama that we get out of it. And Marcus Rashford, I feel like if you think about from an over-indexing perspective, he's over-indexed when it comes to airtime in terms of what he warrants. Do I really? I mean, do I think he's going to do well at Aston Villa? I don't know. Unai Emery is a top quality coach. I don't think there's any getting away from that. If they want him, they'd like to think they can get a tune out of him. Do I think there's a player there? I do. I still think there's a player there. But a player is just ultimately about the tangibles that we see. Football or sports at the highest level is about so much more. It's not just about mentality, commitment, attitude, but it's also about kind of the whether or not you have the stomach for it at the highest level, whether or not you're willing to put in the sacrifices. And that's not just in terms of conditioning. I'm talking about just everything that it takes in terms of discipline, decisions that you make off the field. I find it shocking in some ways that a new manager's come in, and that's a clean slate. We know that. A new manager comes in, he's thinking, right, clean slate for everyone. Yeah, he's obviously had issues with Garnacho, and Garnacho has been integrated back into the team. Yet Rashford and he just could not get on the same page, which I don't think he was simply just digging him out. I really don't. I don't think a manager's thinking like that. A manager's thinking, okay, let me just see what's what. He can only have observed Rashford from afar. Um, but I like to think he's also thinking I need to win some games. So clean slate. Let's see if the attitude is right. And he spoke about it. So the fact that they've not been able to come together, perhaps similar to Ten Hag and Sancho, if you remember, at the end, it just became
Mm.
an impasse. Yeah, you went on to see Sancho contribute massively for Dortmund and got to the Champions League final now playing a part at Chelsea. There's a footballer there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
so the fact that Marcus Rashford, he couldn't get on the same page with Amorim in a struggling team, let's be very clear. So the ball was pretty low, tells you that perhaps his heart wasn't in or at Manchester United Football Club. So From my perspective, I don't think he's that good a player. He's not going to the World Cup. I'd be amazed, actually. He's got a season to resurrect that, but I'd be amazed given England's plethora of options. There'd have to be a number of injuries for him to get back into that reckoning. But I think it's not just about England. That's a long way away. That's the creme de la creme. He's got so much to do to show that he's still a top level footballer who can play at the Premier League at the highest level. So I think he's fortunate to get this gig at Villa. He's married up, let's be honest, in terms of where the standings are right now. But I don't really care for it too much because he's in a lot of ways a you've forgotten player, and it's a shame. But we've seen this happen before. I don't want to use the example of Dele Alli, but there are players who, and
Mm,
maybe even Pogba to some extent. I mean, Pogba won the
mm,
World Cup, but there are these stories littered everywhere where players not quite getting the right guidance, the right advice, and then losing their way. I do think now more than ever, you've just with the professionalism that you need in sports. Again, if you're not developing, you're not standing still, you're going backwards.
mm.
And that's what it is with Marcus Rashford right now. So he's fortunate enough to get this gig. Let's see if he does well. Good on him if he gets his head down and sees the light, so to speak. But I think this is on him. He needs to make some bold decisions because I can't imagine that's on Ruben Amorim, the fact that they've not been able to get it together. Let's see, time will tell. But it's a good opportunity for him. Aston Villa going places, Champions League. Let's see how he does.
Yep, let's see how it pans out. And on that note, I think we'll sign off. It's it's deadline day, so I'll be checking my phone to see if we've signed anybody.
Are you
Don't think
looking to
we
sign
have.
anyone?
Well, I think there was talk of Cameron Archer. We do need oh, in fact, we need a number 10. We need a striker because you
Striker, he
don't want to.
scored seven.
But we don't. The only out and out striker, proper striker we have. Well, we have two. Joseph sort of misfired. He did score at the weekend, but who didn't? And Bamford, he's long term sick. So
Patrick
oh
Bamford. Wow,
yeah,
that's a
yeah.
that's a
So
bad
we
thing.
are looking, but I think it's with Southampton there was a chain that they needed to buy a striker. But it's one where you you want to make sure that you don't leave any stone unturned. There are all of our competitors are improving their squads. Now you can turn around and say we've got a far superior squad. So even if teams improve,
You tell us every week this, by the way.
but you never want to rest on your laurels. You don't want to sort of come the end of the season and say, "Oh, wish we'd just bought one or two players to just freshen things up." But a signing always. I mean, you as a fan, you always want at least one player coming through the door to go on. You're gonna
I was just gonna say that if you're suggesting that Leeds need a striker, I'd like to think Burnley need four then, because
well, Burn. I mean, they've bought in Marcus Stewart, who's a really really good player. I mean, he was at Tottenham, and then he was. I think he was at Sporting where they played
ah,
Spurs, and he absolutely ran rings around Spurs, and he's a winger. Which I think, I mean, I was speaking to George, and George said, well, that allows Foster to play centrally. So certainly it's improved Burnley exponentially. Middlesbrough are buying players, Sunderland are buying players willy-nilly as well. So and Blackburn are buying players as well. So in terms of the playoffs, that's going to be a real competition in the playoffs. And really, what we don't want to do as Leeds is finish in the playoffs because we've got an awful record. But that's for another day and another time. And I think we'll call it a day. It's been a long day. It's probably going to be a longer day for me as well because I'm going to watch deadline day up until. But I'll do that. All right. So as always, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. And until next time, stay safe. See you soon. Ta-ra.